Good to have you here, everybody. The Obama administration is grappling this morning with three controversies, and there are new questions today about what impact all of it's going to have on the credibility, not just of the White House, but our entire government. Ford O'Connell is the chairman of the Civic Forum PAC and a former outreach director for John McCain for president. Chris Kofinis is a former chief of staff to West Virginia Senator, Democrat Joe Manchin. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good to see you, Jamie.
Great to have you both here. Chris, let me start with you because Republicans are taking a bit of a hit by Democrats who are pointing the finger and saying this whole thing, these controversies, these questions, it's their fault.
Well, I'm not sure that, the partisan back and forth is going to help the country move forward and address the fact that we have, two big problems. One, we have a clearly growing deficit of trust amongst the American people, towards their government. That was true under the Bush administration, and now it's true for different reasons under the Obama administration. That is not good for the country or the democracy. And the other part I would say is, we have problems clearly, as we've seen in the IRS, that we've got to address because, again, whether you're Republican or Democrat, these kind of failures should not happen. And when they do, you need to take not only just corrective action, you need to get to the bottom of it and make sure that it never happens again. That, I think, is kind of where the focus should be.
It is the president's supporters that are saying that Republicans are playing a role in all this. But with these hearings, one after another, the finger continues to be pointed at the White House and what they knew. Benghazi, IRS, AP. What do Republicans want to accomplish? Which answers are most critical, and what would be the impact on both the White House and Congress?
Well, I think the danger for Republicans in this is if they overreach and they make this partisan, because once it becomes partisan, you actually kind of feed into the very cynicism that we've seen. I mean, clearly there are problems when you're talking about, I think, the IRS. And then I personally have some real discomfort with the AP story. I think Benghazi is very different for a lot of reasons. But I think the focus should be on trying to solve the problem. And if that's where I think Republicans and Democrats focus, I think it's good for the country and we move forward. If this ends up becoming a partisan slugfest, which unfortunately it probably is going to be to some degree, then it's not good for the country. And I'm not sure we actually do anything to solve the problem.
And Ford, we need to have answers on a lot of these issues. These are critical issues. An ambassador and 3 other Americans died. That hasn't happened in 30 years that we've lost an ambassador that way. Do you think we'll get answers, and how important is it? What impact could there be when we're looking at the next elections?
Well, to Chris's point, look, before these 3 controversies, trust within the federal government, according to Pew, nearly 80% of Americans didn't trust the federal government to be smart and effective. And essentially, that's what we got to get to the bottom here. We got to get answers to these questions because we have to instill confidence in the American public. We got people out of work. We got a growing deficit. We need comprehensive, smart immigration reform. And essentially, we got to use these hearings not to play partisan politics, but to reinstill confidence in the federal government. And essentially, the one that kills me right now is the IRS, because the IRS is an agency that's supposed to lay and collect taxes without prejudice. And given that Acting Commissioner Miller's testimony before the House was a flat-out embarrassment, I'm a little worried that partisan politics is going to get involved here. But I really have to hope that Republicans don't overreach and they do what's in the best interest of the American people, and that's getting answers to these questions so we can move forward and really help get people back to work.
I'm really stunned, Ford, though, about Chris Wallace's interview, where he asks the White House chief advisor there about what the president knew and where he was. And there was some tap dancing, without a doubt. Chris really pushed for an answer that he didn't get. That's on Benghazi. When it comes to the IRS, what about if the White House knew this was going on? We don't know who ordered it either.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's why we have to let these hearings, take place and get to the bottom of it. But yes, I'm very concerned about this executive branch and this administration's ability to effectively manage the federal government. And if we find out that it got outside the IRS, even though the IRS is already claiming incompetence and bad customer service, this is not good for this administration, their ability to get things through. And I am extremely concerned about the fact that Dan Pfeiffer this morning on Fox News Sunday really wanted to tap dance around an issue. This goes to, four dead Americans. And the question is could more have been done? And right now, the White House just does not want to address that. and really confidence and faith in federal government is really lost right now.
Chris, before we go, I have to ask you for some reaction as to the White House's position that no more than 10% of staffers' time should be spent on any of this. There's a jobs initiative, immigration, and other issues on the table. Is that deflection, or can they actually make progress with all of this going on? There's still millions of people out of work.
I think it's maybe a hopeful ratio. I mean, listen, you still have the job that you need to do. There are still big issues that need to be addressed. I mean, immigration reform, obviously the economy. I think that is going to be a major focus of the administration. And on immigration reform, I actually think this is where you can actually find bipartisan agreement. But the reality is, in the way that Washington works, and as indication of us talking about it, there is going to be a focus on these controversies. And I think that's where the administration in the coming days, in particular with respect to the IRS story, has to come out and continue to come out really strong and forceful on this and be ahead of it. And if that's the case, then I think you can focus on the other tasks at hand. What ends up happening, though, is these stories sometimes take a life of their own, and that's what you need to stay ahead of.
Right. It's pretty.
Chris, true, but it's hard. But it's hard
quickly
to have confidence in this administration's solutions to our many problems, from whether or not we should tax more to get people back to work or comprehensive immigration reform, when I can't trust them to actually manage their basic duties like the IRS, the Department of Justice, and the Department of State. I'm hopeful, Chris, that you're right.
Got to leave it there. Trust and transparency, both really important issues. We're following all the developments here at Fox. Thanks for representing both sides. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Kelly?
Thank you, Jamie.